Hello, BookTube. I'm back with another video. I've made more videos today than I expected to, but this is day 7 of E.V. Lucas's essays. And remember, we're going through Domesticities, a little book of household impressions, published in 1900 by Smith, Elder and Company. And E.V. Lucas was late Victorian Edwardian writer, and it's been said that he spoke less words than he wrote. So let's get to it. Today's essay is concerning clothes. And I'll read the first part of the first paragraph because it's almost a page long. It is a curious experience to walk, as I did recently, behind a man dressed in one's old suit. You have a vision of yourself, or, if you will, a glimpse of your double, a reminder that you are not everybody. This being the first time I had seen the suit from the back. A vague sense of familiarity preceded recognition, and then looking steadfastly on its pattern, I remembered how kindly and liberal a coat it was, and how easy and unconstrained all movements of limb had been in it, and how many years it still had before it, and I perceived sorrowfully that I had given away as noble a set of heart-togs as man ever possessed. This proves how careful one should be in parting with cast-off suits. Thoreau affirmed that old clothes should be burnt, and from the point of view of those who hold that attire ought to be autobiographical, this is true, for how can tweeds handed on from one man to another continue to be autobiographical? But Thoreau's contention was a counsel of perfection, that is to say, advice for Thoreau's, and moreover, so few persons have autobiographies that we may as well preserve in the bestowal of old clothes. So I did read the whole paragraph. It was quite long, but it seemed like it needed to be. He says, of old clothes. Let me start again there. Put my teeth in properly. Of old clothes, none wears so sorry an air as the old fur-lined coat. A new fur-lined coat is magnificent. It is a symbol of luxury, the antithesis of a hair shirt. It is more than a garment; it is a fortification. An Englishman's fur coat is his castle. But when decay has set in, when it is partly bald and entirely weather-worn, then the fur coat is the wretchedest object in civilization. And he's saying that fur coats never become hearthogs, nor do overcoats. These, therefore, may be given away or sold without heart flutterings, although the ordinary overcoat should not be parted with lightly. And he goes on to say, and what I seem to hear you ask, what are hearthogs? Old clothes that are less imposing and more comfortable than any others are hearthogs. To be old is not sufficient, nor is it enough that they are easy. To be hearthogs, they must combine both these merits. Good clothes, when they grow baggy and faded, become hearthogs. Bad clothes never. Inferior and ill-fitting clothes become merely old clo. Their derivation of hearthogs is a secret, but all philologists and all who, like Mr. Stevenson, have a love of lovely words will recognize in the term neology of singular fitness and attraction. And it says, in the ordinary life, the wearer of hearthogs disdains coats and mackintoshes except in extreme stresses of weather. It is the winds and rains of heaven and the might of the sun that have made his hearthogs what they are, the indoor life produces a very inferior result. And of old heart dogs, the coat is the most dearly prized. One does not feel so affectionately towards a waistcoat. Little is lovable about a waistcoat, but a coat becomes a friend, a brother. Men have worn coats for decades. A satisfying coat is worth its weight in platinum, because it is so rare. The waistcoat is within the compass of any tailor, but a coat is different. Nothing is quite so disgusting as the determination of one's tailor to have his own way in the matter of the coat. You order a dozen personal touches, but stipulate for no pads in the shoulders, for a deep collar to turn up in wet or cold, for extra pockets inside, for no lining in the back, for no fashionable antics in the cutting, and the tailor smiles and smiles. Nonetheless, he is a villain, for when the coat comes home, it is precisely what you struggled to make certain it should not be. A tailor who will obey to the letter is more than rubies, hence the lovableness of a truly good coat. And he goes on to say hats are lovable as well. Boots, though, no, he says, are too transient to be loved. One dares not love them. At the most, a pair of boots can be hearthogs for a year. Boots seem to me civilization's most conspicuous failure. They pinch, they crump, they mar, and they have every tightness but water tightness. They are hot in summer and cold in winter. They have no durability. They are costly. Now, I would add, he obviously has not had Doc Martens. A good Doc Marten boot will last you a long time. Let's see, where else does he go here? He continues a bit with shoe leather. And he says, indoors, of course, there are slippers, and latterly a very excellent kind designed of felt that has been obtainable. But no good work, it has been said, has ever been done in slippers, and certainly no good walking. Again, he did not have Doc Martens. And he says, in winter, there is nothing more comfortable than hearthogs, but in summer, flannels supersede them. Buoyancy, liberty, and the power to do these things put on with flannels. Flannels are the leveling almost as nakedness. On the cricket field, all men are equal. Has not Richardson bowled Lord Hawke these many seasons? And I doubt not but he would York even the Prince of Wales. But once it appears, at any rate, there are distinctions. In the old days, when George Parr hit the long leg of six and George Freeman bowled like lightning, flannels were a distinguishing sign. In those days, the professional was marked by his dress, for the dependent he was. He wore a coloured shirt, and his whites were not white. You may see them in old photographs, but earliest recollection of county cricket is a Sussex and Surrey match 20 years ago, and I remember distinctly that Pooley's flannels were yellow, Jupp's grey, but now, except for a few cases, there is nothing to distinguish the two classes of cricketers. A change has come over the professional, and his flannels shine like an amateur's. And he goes on to talk a little bit more about the differences between professional and amateur cricketers and their flannels. He says here, yet this new sartorial complexion which the game wears is good, for it emphasizes the socialism of cricket. The opponents of the press ought to bear in mind that no substitute for clothing is more effective than a newspaper. That is to say, no sudden substitute, he says. An American enthusiast who recently walked around the world for a wager wore only a copy of the New York Herald until he had amassed, by exhibiting himself, enough money to buy clothes, and now and then came tidings of a party of tourists who have escaped from the attentions of Italian banditti and or Hungarian brigands in nothing more substantial than last week's Times. And he says, it seems to be established that when in difficulties for clothes, the first thought of civilized man is for a newspaper, just as the first thought of a primitive man was for a leaf. Not the least funny story in that diverting book, Many Cargoes, tells of a captain who lost his clothes at cribbage and was found the next day by his rescuer in a pair of socks and last week's paper. And says this we have seen is not particularly novel position, but what distinguished Captain Bross from his companions in this form of misfortune was his occupation. When discovered, he was reading the advertisements that is true philosophy. The completest Deshali is obtainable in the tropics. The late Henry Drummond once wrote home from Central Africa that he had nothing on but a helmet and 3 mosquitoes. Sidney Smith, who was the first man to pray in August for the power to take off his flesh and sit in the bones, a blessed condition, which on paper at least has been made possible by Professor Rodigan, described the height of bliss attainable by a Sierra Leone native as sitting in one half of a melon and the other half on his head eating the pulp. And he says, like, of all men, tramps and peers care less about their appearance. This indifference to public opinion of one's clothes is indeed an enviable state to reach. I have always liked the story of the old fellow who at home dressed badly because everyone knew him, and badly when he traveled because nobody knew him. He was one of the few men who have the courage to dress to please themselves. And he goes on to say that generally people try to dress to please others, but mostly fail. And he goes, he says, most of us dress to please other persons, and even then, it must be added, rarely succeed. The late Professor Fawcett objected on principle to make himself uncomfortable by dressing for dinner, but he had a very charming way of disarming criticism and propitiating his hostess. He had upstairs, he would assure her an excellent dress suit for which he had paid a high price, and if he would be any satisfaction of the company, his secretary would bring it down and display it. But one has to be Professor Fawcett to carry such a idiosyncrasy as this. And he goes to dinner with one of his collars sticking out, and he's asked, can you help? Can they help with that? And he goes, oh no. He replied genially, it broke while I was dressing. I don't mind. Do you? And Lucas ends with, of the clothes of women I know little, except that the fashion often changes too quickly, and it seems very hard for some girls to dress in such a way as to satisfy their elder sisters. So there ends number 7 essay concerning clothes. And I've come across a word here that I don't know. Propitiating. his hostess. It says propitating, Propitating. I'm going to have to look that up because I have not come across that before, and I'm not quite sure what it means. I have an idea for the context, but I need to look that up. Anyway, there ends Essay 7. The next one is concerning fires. So I will see you then, BookTube.